Mirrors ought to reflect longer before sharing their opinions on my balding head and weakening jawline. Alvin Toffler, in his book The Third Wave back in 1980, talked about what it meant when our economic system searches for new markets. The Republican Party likes this talking point, as well as counterfeit conservative groups, the importance of finding new markets, and how that's a good thing. But what does it actually mean? Toffler says that this is a euphemism. Our economic system has to keep expanding because if it doesn't, says Toffler, it'll collapse. So corporations go into developing countries with natural resources, stage coups, install a dictator, and set about creating their new markets. One way of getting things started is by having the dictator round up the men in the villages and force them into the quarries to dig up materials for cell phones or electric vehicles. They dig up silicon, tellurium, copper, cobalt, and so forth. The problem with forcing these people into the mines is that they now don't have anybody to tend the farms. Prior to Western corporations making these new markets, these people were outside the money system. They grew their own food, made their own shelter, fashioned their own clothes, and so forth. They didn't really need to buy anything. However, now that the men are down in the mines, they don't have anyone tending the fields. As a result, they need money to buy food. This opens opportunities for Western corporations to sell them food. So we just created a new market. But where do they get the money to buy these new goods from Western stores? Now the women have to go to work to generate income. With the men in the mines and the women down in the workplace, the culture of the nation collapses as no one is there to pass on the oral traditions to the children. They no longer get their legends, history, or religious instruction. Toffler comments that that's when Western NGOs come in, bringing schools that teach them Western values instead of their own traditional culture. Gone are their own gods, and in their place are things like gay marriage and feminism. Toffler comments that the Western schools basically teach three things. 1, punctuality. 2, obedience. And 3, the ability to do repetitive tasks. Once these lessons are learned, the kids are shuffled off into the mines where they work with their fathers. Like in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 40,000 children work in the cobalt mines.
No Congo, no fun. And my people say, no Congo, no fun.
Joe Rogan recently interviewed a guest who held forth about the metaphorical hamster under the car hood powering the technocrats' so-called green agenda.
Conflict minerals, also called the 3TG minerals, are tin, tungsten, tantalum, and gold. And those are in the eastern Congo. And that catastrophe started around the year 2000, late 1990s, 2000, shortly after the Rwandan genocide. The militias moved in, and the Eastern Congo is sitting on some of the largest reserves in the world of those 3TG minerals, especially tantalum. And those are all used in microprocessors. And you can think back to, around the year 2000, mobile phones first started coming out and gaining traction. I still remember my little StarTAC flip phone that I had from Motorola. You remember that?
Sure.
And all that supply was coming out of Eastern Congo. Militias and warlords were forcing the local population at gunpoint, machete point, to dig this stuff out. And it was flowing up into the formal supply chain, into mostly those first-generation cell phones. And that became known as conflict minerals. Cobalt started later. Cobalt really took off about 10, 12 years ago. And it's in another part of the country, in the mining provinces in the southeast of the Congo. And cobalt took off because it was started to be used in lithium-ion batteries to maximize their charge and stability. And it just so happens that the Congo, just as it was sitting on more than half the world's reserves of coltan and, of course, a lot of gold and diamonds and other things, is sitting on more cobalt than the rest of the planet combined. And it's in a small little patch of the Congo, southeastern corner, a part that used to be called Katanga. And before anybody knew what was happening, Chinese government, Chinese mining companies took control of almost all the big mines, and the local population has been displaced, is under duress, and they dig in absolutely subhuman, gut-wrenching conditions for $1 a day, feeding cobalt up the supply chain into all the phones, all the tablets, and especially electric cars.
Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations warned about how when a nation industrializes, it requires more raw materials to make finished goods. When the United States brought China into the World Trade Organization and set the stage for them becoming an economic superpower, they unintentionally created a rival for natural resources. Like in the article, US-China's struggle for Democratic Republic of Congo resources intensifies. In it we read, as the US intensifies its efforts to cut China off from advanced semiconductors, it is also making a run at the world's most important source of minerals used in tech, the Democratic Republic of Congo. At any rate, note the rise of warlords and civil wars to destabilize these countries and hand over the raw materials to foreign corporations. These warlords and militias are of course trained, armed, and funded by external mercantile powers who want those raw materials, and the slaves used to mine them. Keep that in mind the next time that someone virtue signals about their electric vehicle. It's morally tantamount to the British using rickshaws in the 19th century. By the way, a wonderful article on energy policy is in the latest New American magazine entitled Back to Energy's Future by Jeffrey Mann. Its subtitle is Radical Environmental Net Zero Goals on So-Called Renewable Energy Sources Which Promise to Turn Society to Pre-Industrial Revolution Conditions. Herbert Spencer in the 1870s lamented the cognitive limitations of people not being able to untangle proximate causes from remote causes. By having you look at the proximate electric vehicle, they want you unaware of the remote causes of that car. What was marketed to you as ethical and pro-Gaia, the stuff of Star Trek, is, as we said, little more than the hamster wheel under the car hood. What was sold to you in the foreground as a sleek new electric vehicle, to replace that old gas guzzler, was in reality a way to get the oligarchs to be able to shut off your car remotely, setting the stage to make you every bit as much of a slave as the person who built the car. Our freedoms are under attack, yet the loss of freedom is not inevitable. America can be saved, and an informed citizenry can and will make the difference. Join us weekly on episodes of Beyond the Cover, and check out our print magazine at thenewamerican.com.